Right, next introductory game, here we come. Do. And in this game, we're going to look at two interesting players. We have Alexander Fier, who's a Brazilian player, used to be 2650, and he's playing a good old English hacker, Dan Bisbee. And this was played in the Reykjavik Open 2011. Dan's a good friend of mine, and he decided to give the Dragdor for a while. I'm not sure if he'd be playing it again after this game. But it's interesting to see how this game developed, because I think Dan has some good chances with the black pieces here. But this is probably one of the most critical lines you're going to get in the Dragdorf, so well worth keeping an eye open for this game. So after bishop to b7, castle's queenside, so this is what we're concentrating on. In the theory section, we'll have a look at this more deeper. And now we don't need to play bishop to g7. I consider this move to be a slight waste of time. I think it's more important to get your queenside pieces moving. And this is one of the advantages of the Dragdorf, that you can, the accelerated Dragdorf, should I say, you don't need to commit your bishop to g7. So knight on bd7, which is definitely the correct move. And now white continued standard fashion, pawn to g4. Worth noting that bishop to h6 is exactly what black wants, because he'll just take the bishop and go rook to c8, and we've saved the tempo by not moving our bishop on f8 then. So g4, very sensible. And now there's two ideas here, but the move I'm going to recommend in the theory section is the move h6. I did actually give knight b6, I think, in my book I did for Everyman on the new Sicilian Dragon. Now, I'm surprised that no one pointed out, I mean, even authors do make mistakes, that there's a tactic available after the move knight to b6, but we'll come to that in the theory section. What I think the best move here is, and it's a move that Dan played, is the move h6. Now, this was originally shown to me by a very talented English junior, Yang Fang, who I coached at the World Under-18 Championships, and he's played this in a number of games with decent results. And this is just a good way. I recommended it in my book, this move. Just hold up white's kingside advance so you can gain some tempo to get your attack into motion. So I like this move h6, and this will be the main subject of our theory section. Now, Fier played in very straightforward fashion, pawn to h4, which has got to be critical. And the whole point behind this now, black needs to create counterplay, and he does this in standard fashion, pawn to b4. I like this move. We're already going to try to do something in the centre of the board. Knight on c to e2 was played. Now let's just have a quick look at knight to d5 and see how this might develop. Now I think black is doing fine after here. Okay, you should just go knight takes d5, pawn takes d5, bishop takes d5. And if white grabs this pawn on b4, well, I think this exchange of pieces has been to black's benefit. He's got a central pawn and he's got some open lines. For example, rook to b8, and if queen to a3, bishop to g7. And one thing that white should avoid here is something like bishop takes a6, when bishop takes f3 is going to be very good for black. There's some tricks on the long diagonal. Remember the dragon bishop. And this is exactly what we're going to put into motion here. So after b4, it doesn't impress me, this move of knight to d5. Much more sensible to plonk the knight on another square. So let's have a look at the way Fier played it. I'll just go back and to the position one after. Pawn to b4. So knight to e2. This has to be the most sensible and logical continuation that white has. And remember, in combination with this move, pawn to b4, in the Dragdorf you often continue with e5, and this is exactly what black played here. The idea is to push the knight on d4 to a bad square. I mean, okay, the knight really has to go to b3, and on b3 it's going to be a target to the a pawn, a4, and we've also got the d5 break at some point to try to get our pieces into the game. So knight to b3. Okay, I mean, d5 here immediately is interesting. It wasn't played in the game. When one possible continuation, I mean, this looks okay for me as well, is knight to g3, and then something like queen to c7. Again, this is normally where you put the queen in this line. Bishop to h3, and now d4. And after bishop to f2, maybe just bishop to e7. And, well, I mean, if white doesn't do something immediately here, black's going to have a ginormous position because he's just going to continue with a5, a4, and he's got a really good pawn structure in the centre of the board. So this is a very interesting way to continue, and I recommend that you study this at home if you want to try to improve on Black's play. But I mean, even saying that, the way Black played was perfectly okay as well. And it's quite funny because I played Alexander Fear in the last round of the tournament with the black pieces, and I tried the Najdorf out, which I've never tried before, and I got completely smashed. And I wish I'd looked at this game in more depth, because I'd have definitely repeated Dan's opening here if I'd been given a chance. Anyway, knight to b3, a5, straightforward, we like that. King to b1. Again, d5 is interesting, but Dan played queen to c7, the best square for the queen. Knight to g3, a4, knight to c1, and this is quite a critical moment. And the reason I included the game in Urka Kliefman in the introductory game is to point out an idea that I think Dan should have used here. You remember in that game that Kliefman played the move d5, but he did this in combination with the idea of weakening the c3 square. Now Dan actually played d5 in the game, which is still okay, but I think an improvement would have been a3 first. The logic behind this move is that after b3, Dan can now play the move d5, and this ensures a pretty decent game here, because taken on d5 will look suicidal now, because knight takes d5, which must be good for black with the knight hopping into c3, and this is what the move a3 has done. It's created the c3 weakness. I mean, probably white's best continuation after d5 is g5, when I expect a natural progression from this position would be hg, hg, rook h1, knight h1, and now d4. This typical push. Pawn takes f6, pawn takes e3, queen takes e3, knight takes f6, and well, I mean, there's no way that black could be worse here. He's got very good control of dark squares, and okay, maybe equal, but he's certainly not worse. So after knight c1, Dan should have probably played this move a3, which would have created a weakness. The way he played was also perfectly okay, but I like this move a3. It seems like black would have no troubles at all in this variation. And we can see just by saving this move, bishop to g7, by keeping the bishop on f8, black's had time to create dangerous counterplay on the queen side in the centre. And this is one of the reasons I like the accelerated Dragdorf. Okay, so let's move on to the game. Dan decided to play the typical d5, still playing very well. White continued pawn takes, then knight takes d5, so our knight's taken up a very good role in the centre of the board. Bishop to b5 was played. Now this is a good move. It puts some pressure on white's centre and black's centre and his pieces. I mean, the one problem black might encounter is that his king is still placed on e8, and this is always going to be a slight problem. Now really the move that got the most Dan in the most trouble here was his next one, rook to a5. Now the computer actually believes that if Dan had played queenside castling here, which looks really odd move, he would have been perfectly okay. He even has chances to be better in this position. I mean, bishop takes a4 is really bad because of some piece coming to c5. Maybe bishop c5, but maybe it's close to winning for black. And I think after some natural continuation like queen e2, a3, bishop a6, knight c5, after a number of exchanges, the position is going to be roughly equal. Black's king's actually surprisingly safe over on the queen side. So this way of playing is another option that black has, queenside castling. Don't forget this possibility that you can castle queenside, even if it does look a bit odd in some positions. But let's see how the game continues, because it's a very nice attacking game. Rook to a5, and bishop takes d7, queen takes d7, and now h5 was played. And around here I expect that white's better because his attack seems to be landing first. A3, so eventually gets his move in, knight to b3, and now the final mistake, rook to a8. Now this is a bad square for the rook. Black should have played rook to a6 when he's still well in the game. The rook's much better on a6 because it defends laterally across the 6th rank, which stops a lot of tricks that white might have. And there's still everything to play for after this move. But the game, white attacked very well after this move, rook to a8, finished the game off very nicely. He went knight to e4, pieces coming in, rook to d8, black's king's certainly in a bit of trouble. Bishop to c5, f5, but white now plays very nice move, queen to h2. pinning the knight on d5 and threatening queen takes e5 check. Okay, Dan thought, well, I might as well grab a piece. Pawn takes e4. Queen takes e5 check. King to f7. Hoping for some counterplay after queen takes rook. But nice finish. King takes pawn takes g6. King takes g6. The king is clearly in trouble. Oh no, sorry, didn't take on g6, which does look suicidal. King to g8, holding on to the rook. Bishop takes f8. Rook takes f8. Knight to c5. Queen to e7. And after rook takes d5, queen takes e5, rook takes e5. Black resigned here. He's clearly in a losing position here. So a nice game. I mean, it does show the dangers that you have in this position as well. If you play a couple of inaccurate moves in the opening, your king is in the centre, so it can get completely wiped out. And that's exactly what happened here. I mean, Dan didn't do anything too wrong with the black pieces, but he did get wiped out. I mean, the move that is worth remembering was this a3 move. But I like this h6 play, and we'll come to the theory section and see a bit more deeply about what other things white can try, see if he can get advantage against it. But h6 looks like a good way yet again to gain another tempo, and black does get a good initiative on the queen side in this line, and that's exactly what we want when we're playing a Dragodorf.